this Parks and Recreation Master Plan effort. So for this afternoon's presentation, I'm going to provide a quick and brief overview of the master planning process, where we are and where we're heading. I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to talk about what we've heard thus far through our community and resident stakeholder engagement processes. He's going to talk about some high-level themed recommendations that we anticipate seeing in the final iteration of this plan, and then some more specific recommendations that fall underneath each of those themes. And then ultimately, we're looking to you all for input, feedback, and hopefully agreement on those themes and recommendations. We're kind of looking to hear that we're headed in the right direction and that we're not leaving anything out. There's not something that you'd like for us to go back and make sure gets included in this plan before we get to its final version here in just a few short months. So the Parks and Recreation Master Plan was last adopted by our council in 2016. It provides the vision framework for how we grow Parks and Recreation services over the next 10 years. It includes parks, recreation, trails, open space, historical and cultural resources, and strategies for implementation. And I just wanted to take a moment to point out that the 2016 master plan that we have currently is a very good plan. So it really does provide a very good foundation for what you'll see ultimately in this updated plan. So a lot of the things that we have in our current plan may not change. What we're looking to do is update, we've got different demographics in our city today. We've got different wants, desires, and needs from our residents today. We have different gaps in services. So that's what you're going to see updated through this plan, and you'll see a lot of the recommendations change from that. One other thing that I wanted to point out is in our last Parks and Recreation Master Plan, I believe there's 107 implementation recommendations that came out of that. We have either completed or furthered, we're in process of completing about 80% of those recommendations, with the remaining of those being either major projects that just didn't come to fruition yet, or some major strategies related to like the Gila River and some of the longer term strategies that you'll see reflected in this next plan, but we just couldn't get to in this last 10 years. So this slide talks a little bit about what a Parks and Recreation Master Plan is, which we've kind of already covered, but I also want to talk a little bit about what it's not. So when we bring this to you in December, we're not looking for you to adopt a capital improvement plan. We're not committing to hundreds of millions of dollars of facility obligation, and it's not a project-specific master plan. So you're not going to say, build this park with these amenities and this location through this plan. It's really a visioning plan. And the process that we've gone through, really we started this process in January, has really been about getting the resident input, the resident feedback, so that when the opportunities present themselves to us in the future to build a park or to build a facility, we at least understand where their priorities lay, we understand where the priorities of our stakeholders are, and we understand where the priorities of our leadership is. So it really will serve as a roadmap as we move forward and start building what this looks like in the future. Taking a look at the project goals, and that font is very small, so I'm going to use my notes here. But these are just the overarching goals that we gave to our partners here in Kimberly Horn when we started this process. So really we were looking for them to create a comprehensive and compelling vision for the future 10 years, propose approaches for accommodating growth while remaining fiscally balanced. So how can we take a look at, much like with our library master plan, incremental growth. It doesn't have to be necessarily going out and building facilities right away, but how can we start providing services before we get to brick and mortar and so on. Identifying gaps and prioritizing improvements for the future in both programming and facilities. Understanding the current and desired levels of service through our programs and facilities, and again, looking if there's any gaps that exist. Understanding and identifying any of the potential partnership opportunities that exist to accomplish this plan's goals. And then finally, evaluating our operations and maintenance practices as they exist currently. So while this plan is looking at the future, it's also taking a look at our current program, facility, and service portfolio And it's essentially going to grade our paper and help us evaluate ways that perhaps we might be able to be more efficient with the resources that we have today. Community services is a large department, so I kind of already mentioned that we've got a library master plan which we adopted last year, so you're not going to see library services reflected in this plan, but it has taken a look at our recreation and senior centers, aquatics, parks and trails, classes, sports programs, intergenerational programs, events, and arts and culture programs. And you see a lot of our community services staff here this evening. They're all working alongside with Kimberly Horn to make sure that they've got all the most current, accurate information, and working really hard to make sure that we've got the very best plan to bring before you here in December. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to take you through what we've heard through our resident and stakeholder engagement so far.
Thanks, Miranda. So as Miranda talked about, one of the biggest challenges the city kind of put forward to us was to create a very engaging community outreach program that really got everyone involved and gave people opportunities to engage how they would like to engage. The first component we talked about was the Cecily Ballot survey. We had over 500 mail-in survey responses back. So that's across the entire city, meeting all the demographics in the different areas, making sure it's equal representation throughout the entire city. We also had a web survey that was available to all folks to provide comments or to fill out. Over 1,000 people participated in that. We also had other interactive components on that website where they could give feedback, do some fun map exercise and a budget exercise as well. We also had focus groups, stakeholder meetings. We had traditional community outreach meetings, but we also did those virtually in addition to in person. And then one of the key elements was the pop-up events. We really utilized these, the city puts on great events, so we brought the meeting to the folks and got input that way as well. And then the other element was the social media, so engaging on the different platforms, working with the city's digital team, and we almost got 20,000 inputs just off of social media. So what does that mean? Almost 24,000 inputs from the community in regards to the plan.
Question, can you go back? Sure. So that roughly 24,000, how many duplicate responses do you think, or people responding more than once to this?
So like when we do the web surveys, it's all tracked. They have to enter a unique...
so that was all stripped out?
Yeah.
Okay, but, and I know it's a guess, and it just, that a person filling out a web survey shows up at a pop-up event and also responds on Facebook. That's one person responding 3 times. And I'm okay with that. Kudos to them for being creative. I'm just curious if you had a guess.
I couldn't give you a number, council member, but I mean, I remember seeing some familiar faces along the way, but I think for the most part, pretty, with the different avenues, I think, you know, the 2 survey elements, I think those are very unique responses, so I think those were good. A lot of it is, you know, what we hear too at the meetings, so I think there was a conversational experience as well.
Okay, thank you.
One other question on that, the social media engagement, you said those are inputs from folks on social media. What exactly are those inputs? Was that like a survey that was out that they're answering, or is it just a watch of a video, or what?
Mayor, great question. So what that could be is we had elements where we did shoot out some questions through media, you know, not the full survey, but various questions throughout. They had opportunities to do different engagements on top of they could just leave feedback, they could leave a various question. So that's kind of what the platform was.
Okay.
The first number of the 524, you said that was, where did that number come from?
So that's the number of statistically valid surveys that were responded to. So to make it statistically valid, you have to have, we shot for, I think it was 400, yeah, but we went above, so it captured that. So good response there. And again, that's that's distributed across all the different demographics in the city area. So you have equal engagement throughout. So that's a statistically valid process.
Okay, is it, when you say it, is that the digital format, is it a paper format?
So it's a mailed out survey. However, when they get the mailed survey, they do have the option of, they can do it via online, or they can mail it back in.
So how many total did we send out? That's how many we got.
I think we sent out 600, I believe. So again, they have to meet a certain percentage. So when that's met, they met that. They always follow up, make sure they get it back. So that's a very good.
Yeah, he said
input.
that's why I went out and
know.
got 524 back. That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's why that's the one I want to know. How many were sent out as opposed to how many got back? Because you sent out, if you sent out 10,000 on 524, I'd be disappointed in that number. But if you sent out 600 and got 524, that's.
So, Councilman, much like with the statistically valid survey for the GeoBond, they hire a company that comes in and facilitates that process. And so, like Sean said, they send out to a certain grouping, and then if they don't get the response, they start making calls and following up and to make sure that we hit the number that we need to get the statistically valid piece of it.
And then they also cross-reference just to make sure that it does represent equal distribution across the city, equal demographics that match up with the census data. So again, you don't have a higher rate of young families that return it, but then you don't have any of the active adults. So they cross-reference that across the demographics to make sure that it is indeed statistically valid.
Very good.
And that full report will be part of an appendices in the actual report. So you will see all the breakdowns of where the distribution was and where it was sent, as well as the response back. So the next slide here, we talk about the methodology, what goes into the recommendations and the themes. So it's really, think of it as a wheel. There's kind of 5 spokes to that wheel. Community engagement's one component of that in terms of what we've heard or what we hear back. Certainly another, so we kind of work our way around the wheel, inventory and benchmarking. So we utilize benchmarking with the Valley cities. We're currently getting a lot of those results in now. But we also have the inventory analysis of the existing facilities and amenities that you do have to understand how those rate and what kind of condition they are in and what they provide. We also had individual interviews with you all folks at the very beginning to really kick off the project and get the vision for the project. We also met with the city executive team as well. And then we also look at the demographics, as Miranda talked about, to understand the current demographics of the city. We also look at trends, what trends nationally in terms of park and recreation, both programming and amenities, but we also looked at on a local level. And then we also utilize some of the past planning efforts. Certainly, Miranda mentioned this as well, as the 2016 plan is a really great plan that provides a great foundation for this plan. So it's, again, building off of that. And then we have the business planning aspect. So we have the operations, staff. We also look at maintenance, practices, what's going on there. But we also have level of service. We're currently evaluating the current level of service of what's being provided, both programs and amenities, but we're also looking at what that desired level of service may be. So that's all part of that in terms of when we develop our recommendations for this plan. So again, we're looking at the top needs for the citywide amenities and facilities. This slide, if you look at the very top, that blue box, that is the stat valid survey. So that's that 528 responses. So those are the top 10 there. And then the orange box is the online. So that's the over 1,000 folks that jumped on the online survey. You can see here we have alignment between the two, but wanted to kind of walk you through the top 5 here. 1, the aquatics and pools. 2, fitness and exercise. 3, art performances. 4, outdoor adventures. 5, splash pads. So again, we're seeing similar alignment from what we heard from the stat valid versus what we heard as folks that jumped on the online. So that's great to have that alignment. The next slide looks at programming. So again, this is across the entire citywide, same circumstance here. The blue is the stat valid. The orange is what we heard on the website survey. Top 5 here, we have hobby interest classes, 2 fitness programs, 3 special event festivals, 4 art programs. So think about what you create, whether that's painting or other different clay or sculpting. And then 5 art performance, what we are watching or particularly maybe even performing in. So that's the top 5 in terms of citywide programming. So we wanted to give you a sampling of some of the Cecilia Ballot survey questions. So we pulled a few of those to kind of talk through a little bit here. The first one, please indicate your support for each potential action the city could take to improve its parks and recreation system. So the first topic was preserve open space and high-value natural resources. The green is very supportive. The orange is somewhat supportive. 87% supportive for preserved open space. Develop new indoor recreation facilities. 84% supportive for that. Invest in updating and improving existing city parks. 81% support there. Identify and acquire land to develop more city parks, 80% in support for that. Construct new aquatic facilities, 80% support for the need for aquatics. Develop new multi-use path or trails, 79%. And then increase the variety and number of recreation programming opportunities, 77% in support of that. The next question, which organizations indicate, which organizations do you or a member of your household use for recreation programs and facilities? So this is a check-all question, meaning that you could fill in where you're going for what to meet your need for recreation programs and facilities. But overall, you see that 53% are meeting that need within the city. But then we also have folks that are utilizing their HOA amenities and programs, so 35% there. Others are utilizing 27% within neighboring cities. 25% are utilizing private fitness centers. Churches or other religious organizations are 20%. Maricopa County, so county type provided amenities and programs, 15%. Local schools, college, universities, 15%. Private sport clubs, leagues, 14%. And none of these was 12%. So top needs by planning area. So one of the strategies, here was, again, the size of the city, 640 square acres, and what that in terms of your growth. So we started to look at the different planning areas. This was a strategy that you guys utilized with your library program, master plan. So this is a very great way to approach to start to hone in, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these specific programming and amenity needs that we found specifically within the planning areas. But here I wanted to highlight a couple of questions here. Overall, how well are your household needs for parks and recreation amenities and programs being met by your HOA? Certainly HOA, homeowner associations is a big part of this plan in terms of where those facilities are located and who is utilizing those facilities within their communities. You can see here, we have 12% that are fully met, 34% mostly met, and 34% partially met. So you can start to see that there are other needs where folks are going beyond their HOAs, but certainly HOA plays a part. As you can look at the next question, do you live in your neighborhoods managed by a homeowners association? 82% that responded said yes to this question. So again, this is also part of our strategy in terms of how folks are utilizing or where they're getting their programs or facilities for parks and recreation throughout the city. The next question was regarding your support in terms of a dedicated funding option that enables the preservation of open space and development of parks, trails, and recreation facilities in Buckeye. So over 73% are supportive of potential bonds or future bond or even a sales tax initiative to support parks and recreation facilities in Buckeye. So here, as we talked about, one of the key strategies was really honing in on those specifics with these 7 planning areas. So what you're looking at here is the top priorities, amenities and facilities. So across the top in the blue, you see the amenities and facilities and where those stacked up in terms of the priority. But then on the going down the list, you can see each of the 7 planning zones. And we matched up with the planning zones that the city utilizes in the planning department. So we have North Buckeye, Sun Valley Parkway, West Buckeye, Central Buckeye, Historic Buckeye, South Buckeye, and East Buckeye. And those are represented on that map there. You can start to see, again, the same areas that the city utilizes in the planning department. We did that here. So you can start to see our top 5 indoor fitness exercise facilities, pretty across the board on that one. Aquatic pool facilities, kind of the same. Indoor track, pickleball courts, outdoor exercise equipment. But you can start to see how it starts to differ a little bit, but there is some similarities, but you can start to see where it's going to help us hone in on what's needed in each specific area instead of looking at the blanket citywide just because of the vast size and where you're growing. The next slide talks about top priorities in terms of programs. So similar graph or chart here with the programs across the top there, and then the same planning zoning areas on the bottom going down. So here we see hobby interest classes, pickleball, adult sports, art performances and events, and then art programs. So here you can see programming was a little bit further across, a little bit more spread out in each of those areas. So what we're looking at here is we're taking all of these various inputs along the way. So we have that community outreach piece, we have the benchmarking, we have demographic and trends, we have focus group meetings, and then leadership interviews. So we're kind of bringing all of that input together. What we heard, what came back on the surveys, what came back on inputs, how we're stacking up to other valley cities or comparable cities throughout the country. And we start to see what those top 5 priorities for investment are citywide. So again, the first one, aquatics, pool facilities. 2, fitness and exercise facilities. 3, cultural centers and visual and performing arts. Outdoor adventure activities. Indoor basketball, volleyball courts. So you can start to see the priorities, how they stack up, and the commonalities of what we heard, kind of bringing it all together. And that's what developed that top 5, if you will. So as we mentioned, with the wheel, with all the different inputs, we started to see common trends or themes, if you will. So we developed 5 themes that we started to organize our recommendations. So we're going to kind of touch on these 5 themes and talk to you about some of those high-level recommendations. So the first theme is the celebrate our natural resources. What we have here is we've listed some of those recommendations that kind of fall within this. Opportunities to connect with nature, passive outdoor recreation opportunities, preservation of natural resources and open space, increased access to Maricopa County parks in Buckeye. So the key recommendations kind of support recommendations to some of these. And when we start to develop our strategies, explore partnership opportunities for Nature Center with organizations like the Audubon Society, continue the investment in Rio Reimagine. The city is very active in that planning effort. Conduct a grant study on land purchase opportunities. Partner with the Flood Control District of Maricopa County to maximize green infrastructure drainage solutions as the need develops. The next theme, enhance community connectivity, connect multi-use pathways and trails. Certainly that's one element of this, but we also looked at connecting communities, how we are connecting together, and that's also in terms of like special events We talked about the 7 planning areas with community HOAs. How do we bring folks together throughout the different areas? Also, investment in rivers to ridges, creating maybe an amber necklace that could be similar to, if you go back east, we have green belts that provide pathways and trails that provide a loop connection around the city or municipality, providing connections to key nature ways, areas. And then strategic communication in terms of how folks are getting their information on events. We heard in the survey that over 71% utilize the Eye on Buckeye or utilizing that, so that's great. That's a great feedback in terms of how folks that's very supportive of what you're doing with that publication. So folks are really relying on that. Some of the key support recommendations: create a trail connection between Skyline and White Tank Regional Parks. So again, such great resources. How do you build off a great amenity like Skyline and connecting it to the regional county park? So looking at opportunities to connect that way, but also looking at adding connection to trails in Skyline Regional Park, making those connections to some of those other, both access of how we're accessing the preserve, but then also to some of those other neighborhoods and surrounding communities, providing access to those areas as well. We spoke about,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Just before I lose my thought, the White Tank Mountain Conservancy and their connectivity initiative, is that included in these, or should we spell it out as a specific thing to do?
Councilmember, great point. Yes, we did meet with, they were one of our key stakeholders, and they have developed quite a planning study on theirs.
Yeah.
We are utilizing those wildlife corridors that they have identified, and that will be it's part of our trails mapping as well. So we certainly will be utilizing that, and that is a part of this plan.
Okay. Just not having seen the whole thing yet, I think it's going to be important to call that out specifically by name. The city supports that effort financially. So, thank you.
And then the last one here, create a 10-year arts and culture plan. The next one, grow a well-distributed park system. Provide facilities and recreation opportunities to keep up with growth. Identify and acquire land for future parks. Partner with HOA communities to provide programs and venues across the city. Partner with school districts and developers to secure dedicated park space adjacent to new school sites. Some of those key supportive recommendations under these elements: create a shared use performing arts space. Work with developers on opportunities to construct parks in master plan communities that could be conveyed to the city. Partner and co-locate future schools and with land for community parks, recreation centers, and aquatic facilities, as well as libraries. So again, you can see here we have a multi-pronged approach that's going to look to how do we work in terms of the growth, but it's not simply just the city building a community park or a recreation center. It's how do we partner and find those opportunities to meet the demand as the growth occurs, similar to how you approached your library master plan. Look for those metrics when those come on board, such as a new school. Again, get in early, understand where those opportunities can be utilized to share resources and opportunities so that we're addressing the growth in those specific areas, but then doing it in a partnership way.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
If you go back. So partner with the HOA communities to provide that questionnaire. What would that look like?
Councilmember, great question. So we were just talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We're working with planning and staff to provide recommendations in terms of the previous plan did a great job of looking at densities and what certain triggers would include amenities or size of park that's needed. We think one of the elements to improve upon this is looking at the onset. So developing a program or a checklist as they begin their process with the city, that they can understand the process from the park side. But one of the elements here is the amount of space that's required. Sometimes a lot of these HOAs will break up that into smaller acreage and providing different, smaller, maybe basin-type parks. And what that means is, in terms of the Parks and Rec programming, the city has concerns or issues of not being able to have the right size space to provide certain programs or even special events. So getting in there early to kind of talk about more of the needs from the Parks and Rec perspective in terms of joint use of space for programs or even maintenance. Doing that up front is what is really kind of the next step that we're kind of recommending here.
And that, what you said there kind of goes on the next question I had. I just wanted to go on record about the part about working with developers and opportunities to build parks and stuff like that. I feel like whenever I've been involved in that, looking at, I'll just use North Star as an example, it seemed like as we go to the table and we're working through and discussing in the development agreement how we want those things to look, that parks kind of get pushed back to the back end of it, and it's one of those things that will be utilized more in the future. And I know that's a hard line to walk with the developers. Always want to make sure that their project pencils for them, but we have to look at it as in the future having the amenities for our people in 30 years, not just having 6 or 7 more houses for their project to make X more at that. So I think that from my perspective, I like to see us be a little bit more hardline on that when we're doing those development agreements and we're going through those motions. That we hold that line, that we make sure that we can have these things in the future when we are built out in 50 years, however long it takes to get to that point. But if we don't do those things now, we'll never have it. So just want to make that point.
Can I just piggyback off that? I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think it's really important to hold to an outdoor open space standard and excellent parks in the HOAs. I think from my perspective, what this gets at is the opportunities we have to partner with, so in the case of a North Star, we're telling them, here's what our minimum standard is. And I think what this is getting at is, you guys build what the minimum standard is, but let us kind of supersize that by providing some maintenance on a specific park and making it a larger public park, or infusing some cash into a specific area and really creating special places, and not only in HOAs, but there's and actually, if we could perfect this with all these different potential partners out there, HOAs, school districts, and in the city, we're all serving the same person that's taking advantage of the recreation. And if we can work together to create these holy cow amenities that draw people to a location, instead of just like the pocket parks or the retention that's, we're going to rock the edges and grass the bottom and maybe kids play out there. There's no light, so it's good for about this much time in the summer, just as the sun tucks over the hill. But then you have to go in when mom hollers at you when the street lights come on. So it's really having a plan and being very intentional about, in our master plan, making sure that we're creating those, or in some cases we're going to talk these folks into, no, allow us to come in and maintain it, because the school district may or may not maintain it to the standard that we need for or want for our community. So there's just so much opportunity there to share a capital expense or share in maintenance or whatever the case may be, in creating some really, really cool amenities for the public.
I think Mayor and Councilmember Yocker, I think there's a balance to be struck on all sides of this, right? So there's a side where maybe, there's a little bit of a hard line that maybe can be drawn, but then there's also maybe some opportunities for the city to partner with developers are willing. And I think that what we've really talked about through this process is getting creative. And like Sean said, we can do this at the beginning. We can have these conversations at the beginning of the development and say, hey, how can we make this really special, and how can we co-locate some of these acres? How can we We now know, based on the different planning areas, what the top priorities are for those residents in that area. So how can we make sure that when you go in and you build your park, that you're addressing some of these amenity needs? You're not just building another tot lot that there's already, we've already got 15 of them in that area. So I think yes to all of what you said is what you're going to see come through in this final iteration of this plan.
Mr. Mayor.
No other answers.
Have we talked to any of the HOAs? I mean, to get any kind of an idea or feeling of what exists today and what their feelings would be like about us stepping in and either partnering with them, taking them over, or them running them and us supplying money? I mean, has there been any conversation at all? And what kind of feedback are we getting from Blue Horizon or Sienna Hills or places that do have some pretty large areas? Have we heard anything at all about what their feelings are?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Bob or Sean talk a little bit specifically about Blue Horizons, because I think they were a pretty big stakeholder at one of our stakeholder meetings. But for us, as the city's Parks and Recreation Department, for us to come in and really consider taking over a piece of property that's privately owned, we have a standard of at least 16 acres or more, just simply because mobilizing a parks crew to go out and maintain an acre here and an acre there all over the city just would not be very wise use of our resources. So we would want it to be significant recreational value to the public. And that's where the balance comes in, right? Because these HOAs are technically their private parks for their residents. So once we come in, they've got to be then public to and open and welcome to everybody. So that's where the conversation sometimes hits a little bit of a hiccup of, would some of these folks like for us to come in and maintain what they've got? Sure, but are they ready to open it up to everybody to utilize? Sometimes that's a little bit of a harder conversation. I don't know. I know that Blue Horizon was a loud voice and a supportive loud voice at our stakeholder meeting.
Yeah, and I would say there's a balance there. So, I think the HOAs are interested in having the programs for their residents to use, but then they're also concerned about the maintenance. So if we bring in a lot of outside people into their community to offer these programs, what impact does that have for their maintenance contracts? And so I think there's that balance there of what we're able to provide and how they want to maintain those parcels. So I think that's also part of the conversation. But for the most part, I think they're in support of having those programs in their communities close to where their residents are living. But again, it's that balance from the maintenance side of the house.
Thank you.
The next one, strategically provide programming opportunities. Increase special event program offerings, expand arts and culture programming, offer adaptive recreation programs, increase indoor venue options to offer additional programs. Some of those supportive recommendations. Partner with HOAs to host special events in various areas throughout the city. Assess partnership opportunities to expand nature-based education programs. Provide adaptive recreation programming for all ages. Explore opportunities to provide recreation programming in master plan communities. Similar to kind of what was just discussed there. Again, it's about a partnership to accomplish and provide a lot of those programming and amenity needs, and understanding where we can share resources. It's only going to be a benefit to stay hand in hand with that growth as the city continues to grow. The last one, reinvest in existing assets. So again, looking at continue to focus on asset management and maintaining high quality parks. Create neighborhood identity within the parks. Design venues to accommodate large gatherings. Balance use and overuse of limited sport fields. Some of those key supportive recommendations. Add pickleball courts where feasible in parks. Implement park ranger program. Implement formal volunteer program. Create a gateway on Monroe Avenue realignment near Town Park. Study connection options between 6th Street Plaza and City Hall for events. So again, trying to find opportunities for some of these venues for larger gatherings and the special events. One of the things I wanted to point out is the city is they've been very forward thinking with their asset management. They're certainly ahead of the curve. So I just wanted to maybe point out Mark heads up that, and he's actually created a very unique strategy. So if you look at a QR code, right? So we utilize QR codes for our survey. So that's that little box you see. You can hit it with your phone. It pulls up the information, takes you to a website. So Mark is actually engraving those on all the different playground equipment, facility, amenities, benches, trash can, whatever it may be, infrastructure. And so a worker can go there and scan the code, and even bring up on his phone, it can tell him when something was last serviced, when it needs to be replaced, how long it's been maintained, any special things that need to occur. So again, very proactive to stay ahead of the curve and track and maintain what you have, and provide that continued high quality of parks and recreation amenities throughout your system. So that, again, we're not seeing that in a lot of different cities, so kudos to the department on that aspect. With that, Miranda's going to talk about some of the next steps.
Okay, so just next steps and looking forward. Right now, we're going through the benchmarking process, so they're gathering all the data from our surrounding cities, other national cities that are similar in size and growth patterns to us, taking a look at our level of service, and then also doing an organizational structure assessment. It's probably no secret that a lot of well, maybe I'll just speak for my department, a lot of things got kind of shifted during the recession and so forth, and so some of the structures maybe need to be a little bit realigned to help make sure that we're prepared and ready for growth as it's coming. So they're going to do a full assessment of that as well. We did just present to Planning and Zoning last week, and then also the Community Services Advisory Board. We're getting ready to hit the road show with our friends in the GeoBond communication folks, and then also our friends in fire. So we've got a host of meetings coming up over this next month where we're going to go back out to the public, talk with them about what we heard, solicit feedback on that again, just like we're asking for you tonight. Make sure that we're marching to the right beat, and that we're on the right path. And then we'll be bringing that back then again with the final draft and recommendation for the plan in December to P&Z, to our advisory board again, and then ultimately back to you on December 17th. So with that, what we're looking for from you all tonight, and I appreciate the conversation throughout, is any feedback on those 5 themes and focus areas. Again, if there's anything that you really want to make sure that we include, like the Vice Mayor suggested, or anything that you feel like we've missed, anywhere where you feel like we're off a little bit, just let us know if this is consistent with what you're hearing, and if you have any questions or concerns. With that, I thank you for allowing us the time, and kick it to you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. What a great process, and thank you for putting all this together all the time. I know it is. It's been meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and getting to where we are right now. So thank you, all the staff, and for you guys for doing such a great job of putting this together. So council, any questions, thoughts, ideas? I think we hit quite a few. But just a couple things to point out. 23,000 inputs is unbelievable. We don't need to dig more into the 19,000 that was the online stuff, but I think that's phenomenal that we had that reach out into the community, and an input back from the community that got us to where we are. That's probably 20-ish% of the entire population of Buckeye that's had an opportunity to give input. So congrats on that. And then HOA from city amenities. I think when we look at that from a City of Buckeye perspective, just about everything that's growing in right now has an HOA associated with it. The older areas, I guess maybe 90 or pre-80 in Phoenix or Glendale or some of the areas that have grown previously do not have HOAs. And so that changes the formula for us out here. We can rely on HOAs to provide a little bit more of that and hopefully partner with HOAs to create a more robust experience for our residents and their residents, which are the same. But it's different than it has been in say Glendale, where you're having to, as a city, build a lot more of those parks with public dollars. How does that play into how this plan is executed forward?
Well, so in 2016, the council adopted a level of service that was 8 acres per 1,000, which is pretty typical. You'll see across national standards and even local, right? Some of our local neighbors have a higher level of service than that, some have a little bit lower. At that time, council, I think very smartly, really pressed on the same concept, right? We've got a lot of new neighborhoods coming in, and so these HOAs are bringing, so do we need to have 8 acres of public park space? And the answer at that time, and I think at this time, is also no. That there can be a nice split of that. So at that point, the level of service set was 4 acres private, 4 acres public. I think that in discussions with the developers moving forward, the 4 acres public can be maybe developer provided, but open to the public through agreement, or there's different ways for us to creatively figure out how to still meet that level of service. But again, perhaps the city doesn't have to build all of that on our own, or it's partnered, or it's alongside of a school district, or whatever that looks like. So I think that we have a really unique opportunity here to do it differently than everybody else has. I guess the other piece that I would say that I think historically has been missed in the privately provided park acres is the programming. When you have an HOA park, typically you don't get the public programming for exactly a lot of the reasons that Bob talked about. They don't want to it's hard for them to maintain. It's, so again, does that mean that does that stop the conversation? It doesn't have to. So I think it's about, again, having those conversations at the beginning of the development and figuring out how can we provide these services that I think people expect when they move to a city, close enough to them, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know that I have a clear, defined answer, but I hope that we create that in the next 10 years of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's more of a partnership between us and the HOAs, and we don't have to build as much of that open space as a municipality because some of that is being taken care of by the HOA.
That's the desire.
But an incredible opportunity to partner with them on those.
And it's just about making sure that we're working with them so that we're not just having 1 acre tot lots, because that doesn't provide recreational value to residents over the age of about 5, right? So how do we make sure that that's being balanced and that there's amenities being provided for all ages?
There was an amenity list, and it looks like everybody wants an aquatic center. So
it was the number
get to
one.
Work on that pretty quick.
It was the number one by a lot.
Yeah. How does that change as we grow? Just looking at the different areas, and some areas are looking for connectivity with nature. Some are really more keyed toward the indoor recreation centers or volleyball or basketball, whatever it is. As we grow out, do those things change? So I guess this rendition 10 years from now is probably a different list of amenities the public is looking for.
Well, I think it will be no matter what, because we'll have different amenities, right? So, theoretically, we're providing something probably different between now and the next 10 years. So theoretically, if we were to build an aquatic center, maybe our residents aren't as hot for a new aquatic center. Now they're hot for, something else. So it will change. It's different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, our number one by far was a splash pad. We've now built a splash pad, and so now you're not hearing as much, how come we don't have a splash pad? So I think that's why it's important to keep updating these. And again, first of all, I think the aquatic center and connecting with nature are the two things that we heard very consistently across the city in all areas. Some of the other areas had different number twos, right? So as these opportunities present themselves in the different areas throughout the city, it gives us a good idea of things that we consider that, we know that residents are excited for or really desiring.
Okay. Yeah, my last one, that I think Councilman Eustace has one. I saw arts and culture kind of woven through each one of these, and that's a big item. I hear that from people all over the place. When are you going to bring some performing arts space or places for public art, and that's definitely something we're hearing from the community.
Yeah, I should have said that's probably the top three was aquatics, connecting with nature, and arts and culture, whether it's performing, opportunities for classes. Arts and culture was very, very consistent throughout the city.
Okay,
Agreed.
Councilman.
It seems, and maybe this doesn't have a lot to do with it, but it might have a little bit to do with the parks. It seems that our state legislature seems to be trying to take away some of the powers of the HOAs. They've already got the proposal on there right now about the streets. That the streets, instead of being controlled by the HOAs as far as parking and other things of that type, if it's not voted on by a quorum of the residents, which most of them can't get, they're going to lose that power to maintain and control their streets. I don't know in the future how they may go after looking at parks or other things that the HOAs have taken upon themselves to maintain and control. So we may want to check with someone also along that line, because if they're going after the streets, they're going after other powers that the HOAs have had in the past. Are they going to take some of the other powers away when it comes to maintaining and taking care of the parks? I don't know if they can do that. They've already, like I say, put it up for a vote, I think by this November 30th, that each individual HOA has to have a quorum, the majority of the people that own the property there vote. And if it's anything like Sundance, you'll never get that in the family section. You will in the active adult, and they will probably be one of the few that will be able to maintain the control on the streets, but nobody else can get a quorum. So it'll be interesting to see the state taking away all of the authority these HOAs have had. Are they going to do that with the parks? Are they going to do that with any other amenities that the HOAs control?
Councilman, I haven't heard anything about that, but we'll definitely look into it and make sure that it's addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Guy, any comments or questions?
You guys have covered it pretty well. I appreciate the comments that have been made. I love the flexibility of this plan and all the work that's gone into it. And of course, my passion, my why has always been our fabulous open spaces, rivers. They truly are what, if we do it right, can set us apart as one of the most distinct cities in the valley. So just thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, council, seeing no other comments. Again, thank you for